Hello, everybody, and welcome to this weird stream. What is going on? This one? No, that should be there. Give me a second here. I don't know where this... Over there. Oh, there we go. Right, that was weird. Hello, once again. Hello, and welcome to the stream. You know, when you think you've got things sorted out, you leave something on, and, well, things just go crazy. Anyway, Matt Shaker, yes, I did summon thee. I did summon thee for this stream here so that at least there are a couple of us around to chat and to talk. So welcome, welcome, welcome to the stream. Of course, this month is Player Month here on How to Be a Great GM. We are celebrating the launch, successful launch of my Kickstarter here behind me. Or next to me, I should say, on the Practical Guide to Being a Great Player. That Kickstarter is still running. We've smashed through several of our stretch goals. There are a few more stretch goals left, 16 days left on the campaign as well. There's a link to it if you want to support it. It is one way, by the way, if you haven't got all of our other books, of getting our books. You can sort of buy them as a bundle. Certainly saves on shipping, as shipping is unfortunately getting to a point where shipping a physical book is almost as expensive as the book itself, which is a sad space to be in my opinion. Anyway, we are creating characters, and that means, let me see if I open this up, what's going to happen? I'm not sure. All right. We are creating characters tonight, continuing to create characters as a matter of fact. We have already got 3 characters, which I have kept here. And just to refresh your memory, we have a character, a female dwarf. This is in the Mage Hunter fantasy world, named Estrix Breakbone, who is structured, disciplined, crane-like, and decisive. She's a diplomat, or aspires to be a diplomat, because her personal quest is that she doesn't want to repeat mistakes of her forebears. In a completely different universe and in a completely different environment, the cyberpunk environment, the near future, we have they, that's TH4Y, who is a half cyborg, half AI human. And they're innocent, young, and designed to be the perfect hacker. They're a Netrunner hacker. They are from a Mars colony in a game that is very cyber noir. Now, they are looking for or have someone who wants to be free of an unbreakable pact. That's who they are. Quite different from our diplomatic dwarf. We then have, in a Call of Cthulhu-inspired environment, someone who wants to catalog powerful creatures or characters is a human scientist. This is in the 1980s, mind you. And this is Dr. Evan Rockstikovitz, or Dr. Rock, as he likes to call himself. He's a poet, he's stubborn, he's calm, he's steady. He's also a musical metalhead. And he brings that to the table. So we've got some very interesting characters that we are slowly starting to build. But these are not yet amazing characters, and they certainly won't make us great players just because we brought these characters to the table. They are a component thereof. They certainly will contribute to our experiences, but we need to take them even further. And I've completely lost my place in the book, so give me a second. I'm busy working through... I'm actually working through the book as it is written. This is the Practical Guide to Becoming a Great GM. It's written, it's been edited, and yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so where are we? We need to choose. We've already done that, so that's fine. Okay, 8 key questions. 8 key questions. Now, these 8 key questions, we've got enough information here to be able to answer these 8 key questions. I'm going to be asking these questions of you, And I suggest, if you are watching, to choose one of the three characters. So choosing Estrix, the structured, disciplined, decisive, dwarvish diplomat who doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of her forebears, or they, TH4Y, the half cyborg, half AI Mars colonist who's a hacker and who wants to break an unbreakable pact, or choosing Dr. Evan Rock, the 1980s human scientist who's a metalhead who is trying to catalog powerful creatures or characters, who's a poet, calm, steady, but stubborn. So I would choose one of those three as I throw out these questions, because what these questions are going to be doing is entrenching something that I personally believe is fundamental to creating an amazing character and an amazing story in which that character fits. And that is the fundamental of truth. The way something is true for you or for me is if there is a lot of detail, a lot of proof around the thing. The more proof, the more real it is. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're looking at conspiracy theorists and you're looking at car salesmen, you're looking at folks who are trying to convince you of something, they will try and give you as many yes answers, as many truths as they can, to the point that you feel that there is so much truth, whatever they're saying must be reality. It must be real. And so we need to do that with our characters. We need to convince ourselves that our characters are real. That means that they need to have lots of truths, and the only way to bring those truths to life is to be able to answer fundamental questions about them. If you don't have the capacity to answer those questions about these characters, it means that they remain ephemeral. They remain intangible. They're in the ether. They're not exactly real. They're kind of real-ish, but they're not as real as they could be. By answering these questions, we make them more real. We give them more truths. And what this does, of course, is that when we are then using them in game, when we're interacting with other player characters and things, they are bringing all of this information with them, which is only going to help you when it comes to improvisation, when it comes to working out what their goals are, what they're going to say, what they would feel, how they would act. The more truths you have about your character, the stronger your character is going to be. However, there is also a limit. I have seen, and I have made videos on 100 questions that you should be able to answer for your character. And you're like, 100 questions. You won't remember that. You really won't remember that. There are some basic questions which you will remember. Otherwise, you just won't remember the rest. There's just too much. Just a quick break as I say hello to Kathy Evans, Ranger Rhea, Dragon, and Agile Mike. Hello, 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 and hello some more. Lovely to have you with us. And Beyond Fantasy as well. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Remember to hit that like button if you enjoy this next hour with me as we are working through this character creation process. Something that we are definitely going to look at tonight is using a map to inform our answers. And it's going to be really easy when it comes to doing our dwarf, because the map is absolutely appropriate. Not so easy when it comes to the other characters, but we are there. Strix says, I'm an elf lord planning to sail to the Undying Land. I wish you the best of luck with that voyage, my lord. And if you happen to, disappear, but just make sure that there's a piece of paper saying that you've left all of your lands and title to me. That would be nice before you set sail. Anyway, let's jump into it. The questions that we're going to be asking our character, if you've been watching these channels quite often, you'll know these questions already. These are not new questions, but they are fundamental building block questions. And how you answer them can be very useful as well. The very first question is, where were you born? And the map becomes really useful for this kind of thing. So let's go to that map now. And here we have the map. This is a map that I made a long time ago for the channel. And it's useful because it's got a lot of fantasy elements packed right in and right on top of each other. So when it comes to creating a character, it's really interesting. So if we take Estrix, for example, our diplomatic dwarf who does not want to repeat the mistakes of her forebears, where could she have been born? Well, this question you need to ask your GM some information first. Hey GM, where is our world? What's our world setting? Where's a map of our world? Do we have a map of our world? And then even if the GM says, yeah, here's a map, you go, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about the Eye of Ordifice? The Eye of Ordifice. What happens in this region of the Eye of Ordifice? Is it a habitable region? Is it an abandoned region? Could my character have grown up in a little village near the Eye of Ordifice? Talk to me more about this Eye of Ordifice. And the GM might say, no, it's completely abandoned. Good luck. There's nothing going on there. All right. What about Arkenhold Castle? Well, you could have been born in Arkenhold Castle. It's a castle. It's got docks. It's got quite a large little community inside of it. A large little community. There are these things, and then there's a little village called Vulcan Village just outside of Arkenhold Castle. All right. Well, let's keep going. What's Lenghas Lodge? Oh, well, that's an outpost. It's the last lodge before the Great Swamps, the Norwen Fjords. And these are big cliffs and typical fjord-like things. And Lenghas is the, it's the longhouse, right? Okay, great. Gelder's Mine. Gelder's Mine sounds interesting. Talk to me about Gelder's Mine. Oh, well, it's a mine. It mines down and it mines tin and copper. Okay, great stuff. So my dwarf, if I think of Estrix, she can come from Gelder's Mine. That's an immediately apparent answer. Now, if she's from Gelder's Mine, it means that she has been basically near the Deathland Corpseland, which is this giant dragon that died and is slowly rotting in this territory. So she grew up just on the edge of it. So she is definitely going to know about the Deathland Corpseland. She's going to know perhaps a little bit about Lenghas. She's going to know about the journey from Gelder's Mine through the mountains, past the Sanhuri stones into Arkenvale in order to sell the ore or the copper and that sort of thing. This is stuff that would be in her space if she's from there. It's also fairly isolated. The only civilizations that are not on the other side of the mountains are in the Deathland Corpselands, such as Sarret. So, does she know about the journey from Gelder's Mine to Sarret, around the skull and the spine and some of the bits and bobs of the dragon, or do they go along the ridge line, in which case, unfortunately, Allswatch Tower might be easier. There might be a pass between Gelder's Mine and Allswatch. All of this that I am busy extrapolating from this map, that I am busy adding to my thinking to answer this question of where was your character born, is I'm looking at these going, okay, is it interesting? Is it challenging? Is it something that I might be able to use in the future moving forward, or not so much? This is an interesting question, I think, anyway. So I'm actually going to say no. I don't think it's that interesting if she's coming from Gelder's Mine. I think that's a little bit cliched, a dwarf from a mine. And also, I'm like, well, I think Sarret is more interesting. This little town surrounded by a little low ridge of mountains, but absolutely in the middle of the Deathland Corpseland. That, I think, is a far more interesting place for her to come from. Or even over here, Cliffloft, the town that leads down into the Deathland Corpselands. That could work too. So where do I find the greatest interest as a creator, as someone who is looking at this character? I think Sarret wins for me. Sarret wins for me, and I'm gonna, these things are rattling around constantly. So I'm going to say she was born in Sarret. Now, every single one of these questions, this is question number one, every single one of these questions, born in Sarret. The immediate follow-up question is, how does your character feel about that? What do they think about Sarret? What perspective does it give them? Sarret is surrounded by the Deathland Corpselands. There are giant magical infused maggots that will eat anything that moves. There are rot corpses, there are ghouls, there are mutants, there are bits of dragon bone that are infused with magic. There's chunks of blubber and fat. There are, forget quicksand, we've got quick blood, which looks like a black lake, and you can walk on it until you crack the surface like a scab, and then you plunged into this warm pit of goo which digests you. I mean, this is horrid, absolutely horrid. And so that's a grim experience, and maybe that's why she's disciplined, and maybe that's why she's structured. You can't just go running out in the fields. You have to be very careful about this stuff. Your approach, your journey. There is a little road that runs from Sarret all the way to Cliffloft. And that journey is not easy. You're going past the ribs of this dragon. So that's another thing. So how does she feel about being born in Sarret? Would she have rather been born in Arkenvale? Life's certainly easier in Arkenvale. Sarret, I think she's going to say, is a miserable place. So misery, and I would say struggle. Right? So those are the truths about what she feels about Sarret. Now think about, and if you're struggling, just think about, how do you feel about where you were born? Do you have regrets? Do you even think about the place where you were born? Do you still live in the same town in which you were born? When I think of my own homeland, where I was originally born in a little town called Greytown, I'm very sad when I visit there, which is not often. Once every maybe 10 years, and then usually it's by chance, not by choice. Because the town I remember was vibrant, flourishing, optimistic. Now it's run down, forgotten about, almost abandoned. And that's very sad, because I look at it and I go, well, yeah, that's sad. Do I regret being born there? Absolutely not. It taught me a whole bunch of languages: German, Zulu, English, and Dutch. That was pretty amazing. But I have quite a lot of thoughts on that. I had my initial friends were from there. So how do you feel? How does your character feel? Estrix feels that there's misery and suffering, and it was a struggle. And you had to be disciplined and structured, because otherwise you died. So I think that's quite a good demonstration. Now, if we go on to our net running half cyborg, half AI from the Mars colony. Well, they're from a colony. They live on the Mars colony. That's where they're from. So the first question would be, and I don't have a map for this, so let's leave the map so we don't confuse ourselves. The first question is, where on Mars? Now, we know that they're half cyborg, half AI, half human. So their human side could just have been in a Mars hospital somewhere. And perhaps they don't consider themselves to have been born until they got their half cyborg status. Maybe that's when they feel that they were born, their true birth. So where does that half cyborg AI interface come from? Where does that happen? Now in Cyberpunk, the notion of AI, of computers and robots taking over is definitely prevalent. So where or why that was done is the question. And I think we can say, okay, was this military? And I'd like you to vote on this. Were they militarily converted into a half cyborg? Was it a medical experiment? Was it by choice? Was it gang related? Were they manufactured into a half AI cyborg thing? Why do you think they became half cyborg. Because once we figure out how they became a half cyborg, we can figure out where they became a half cyborg, and that will give us their origin story. Whilst you think about that, I'm going to look at the comments. A girl related to Kingsley Arnis was named Brandy Vermouth for she was born in a bar called the Lucky Gem. Sure, okay, there we go. I also like to go straight for knowing the ending I am going for, whether I'm going for a tragedy or a hero's journey when character building. Well, absolutely, we will get there. I generally avoid doing it early on because I want the character to tell me what kind of journey they're going on. I want to be able to see what kind of journey they're going on. If you look at Estrix, for example, she believes Sarit is this town of misery and struggle, and that's why you had to be disciplined and structured or you died. That's quite a grim outlook on life. She could have a journey of learning to let go and unwind, but we need to see more details first. Agile Monk says, isiZulu is a fascinating language, Sagai. It absolutely is. It really, really, really is. Got a lot of interesting sounds in there as well. I see that Beyond Fantasy is still working on this Elf Lord character, which is great. Beyond Fantasy says, this is a great book. This is the culmination of a lot of my work and research into everything that players need. So has anybody made a call on our cyborg? I'm new to sci-fi, but I learned something recently that helped me learn how to get into the genre. Well, share with us. Share with us. Allah feels as people that deep down we accept the candles within our bar. To give permission to light the light of others. However, it also invites the car. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to move forward on this one in terms of the cyberpunk. I am going to say that they, TH4Y, unless somebody else comes up with something, I'm going to come back to them. I'm just going to move through to our Dr. Evan Rock, number 1. Where was he born? It's the 1980s. Where on Earth was the 1980s the most interesting in terms of having powerful creatures? And I'm going to be a little bit selfish here. And I am going to say that Dr. Evan Rock is actually from South Africa. And I'm going to say in particular, he is from a town called, let's say, Vryheid. Okay. The town of Vryheid, Freedom, is a little town that is in the middle of nowhere, but it is surrounded by the most spectacular countryside you can imagine. And there are lots and lots of game reserves around, which gives him the opportunity to go and look for powerful creatures. Lions, elephants, leopards, cheetah, that sort of thing. Now, it's the 1980s, so that means that South Africa is deeply segregated as well. There is the oppression of the majority of the population, and sanctions are applied to South Africa from almost every other country on the planet, which means that getting his metal fix, all that kind of stuff becomes a challenge. It also means, though, that he is operating in isolation to a large degree. The other reason why I'm interested in this idea is because in the 1980s, South Africa had a lot of nuclear enrichment, nuclear development programs going on. And it could be an interesting gateway to our more powerful creatures and things. So I think South Africa, Vryheid, is where he was born. How does he feel about being born in Vryheid? He would have been born here probably in the 1960s, if we're going to make him in his 20s, because the era is the 1980s. So I think he would feel like it was home. It was safe. It was luxury. I think he's going to feel very positive about that. Most folks in the 1980s didn't even know that apartheid was happening. They didn't even know that segregation was happening. They knew there were different rules and things, but everyone just seemed to accept it as if it was a thing. There were some that fought against it, absolutely. And my own parents were often arrested because of violating these bizarre rules which made no sense to anybody. But it was still but this is what the whole world is like, is it not? Because that's what the propaganda was. So I think that's what he's going to take away from that in terms of that. So then his name is not Evan Rokstikowitz, because we were looking for a rock something. It could then be just Dr. Evan Rock, which is Rokke. Which would have been a German origin originally, and so on. All right. So let us go back now to our cyberpunk character. Let's see, what have we got here? In the film Battle Beyond the Stars, character Gelt says, "I was born in space." Yes, okay. I like organic evolution of technology from the military. It was a dilemma still unanswered for. Centralized military equals industrialization. Okay, I'm happy with that. They were born in a military installation. And unlike the normal trope, which would be, oh, I was taken by the military to have secret experiments conducted on me against my will. Yes, that's a lot of fun, and certainly that opens up a lot of questions. But let's turn it on its head. The exact opposite. I volunteered. And enjoyed it. Because, remember, this person is innocent, young, and designed. I enjoyed it. Relished the power and attention. I think that's what I'm going to say there. Okay. Now we've got our answer to question number 1. Super simple, and we've got 3 interesting characters. But you notice how, and I'm hoping you noticed how, just by choosing the place of birth, we've got someone who's had misery and struggle, someone who's enjoyed it, relished the power and attention, and someone who's feeling safe and luxurious. As Zorgrim is saying, could be fun to play the guy conducting the experiments. For sure. You have a willing test subject. Yes, cut my arm off and turn it into a USB port. Yes, let's take half my brain away and replace it with an AI. Some interesting ideas. Okay, now that we've established how they feel about it, we also need to think about, okay, what is the local knowledge that they're getting? So Estrix knows all about Sarit, knows all about the Deathland, Corpseland space, navigating these rotting, festering spaces, knows about survival and the hardship that goes with it. They, TH4Y, knows about the military operations, knows about scientific experiments, knows about why they were created, possibly knows about what their missions are. We'll get to that one in a little bit. And Dr. Evan Rock is just by virtue of being born in the country he was born in, he's living the greatest life possible. Yeah, sure, things are a little bit weird, but it's the 1980s. The internet is about to arrive. Not in South Africa, not yet. It wasn't unbanned for a long time, but by the 1980s, I think it had arrived at one of the universities that had managed to slip it in. But everything was very censored. The government was militaristically very powerful and paranoid. So as long as Dr. Rock's work is on animals, then he's fine. So, yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, question number 2. This one we've already answered, but this one is more about thinking along the lines of the impact. And this is about the character's gender. What does the character feel about their gender? And how might that impact them? So when we look at Estrix the dwarf diplomat in Mage Hunter, again, we go to our GM. Hey, GM, how are females treated in this fantasy world? Let's have a look at the fantasy world. Let's go back and see if the map can give us any indicators. This world, this space, it's not very big. We can see. Oh, you can't see it because it's hidden beneath my video feed. But 5 miles is about a quarter of the map. So it's not a huge distance. Sarret to Clifftop, I would say, is maybe 25 miles total. So it's not a huge distance. So this is a small self-contained map. But does the map tell us anything about gender? I don't think so. We're not seeing any immediate things. I mean, you kind of go, well, what would you see on a map that might give you? You don't know until you look. And when I'm looking at it, I'm going, Sarret is an isolated town, and either Sarret has the luxury of being able to discriminate and go, well, no, actually, all females have to stay at home and do the cooking. Or, and this is what I strongly suspect, I'm just going to move myself because I see I'm right in no. I want to move me. There we go. That makes a bit more sense. So Sarret is isolated. Your nearest population is Cliffloft or Gelder's Mine. You're in a very difficult land. Very difficult to survive in. So I would say that the genders are equal. So how does our Estrix feel about being a female dwarf as opposed to being a male dwarf? To be honest with you, I don't think she cares. That doesn't fit with structured, disciplined, decisive. And if she doesn't care, then that means that she definitely doesn't care about anybody else either in terms of gender. Why? What should I care, right? TH4Y, on the other hand, we already know what they feel about gender. We've kind of brought this up before. The descriptor we had was that the TH4Y unit represents or considers themselves non-binary and too good for gender. So they might say something along the lines of gender is irrelevant. So then, unlike Estrix, who doesn't care and will treat you the same regardless, TH4Y is actively working against gender descriptors. And you will probably find that they've deleted the he, him, she, her words from their vocabulary. So everybody is a they, as far as they are concerned. So that's an interesting one. How do they feel about gender? Well, what becomes interesting, I think, as a question, this may never come up in role-playing. It may never surface whatsoever. But it is a truth that makes the character realer. Is, although TH4Y might feel that they are too good for gender, something that they may have as a bugbear is that they very clearly are physically of a specific gender. And so people will call TH4Y a he or a she because they look like a he or a she outwardly. And that, I think, could be a little grating point for TH4Y, a little point of conflict. Not with the person themselves. They can't blame the person for going, well, unfortunately, you have all of the attributes of this particular gender, and I called you that because that's what I've been raised as. It's more a case of, TH4Y wishes that they didn't have that. So that could be a quest for them to try and de-gender themselves. I mean, it's an interesting journey. It's an interesting journey. It may resonate with folks watching. It may not resonate with folks watching. But it is something that gives us as creators a reality, a truth. So I would say trying to de-gender themselves. I don't know if there's a proper term for them, for that particular approach. But that's what I'm calling it for now. Okay. Big Sarge. Hello, everybody. Hello, Big Sarge. Zorgrim asks, is Sarat a fisherman's town? Well, Sarat does. If I look at the drawing that I did, it looks like there's a moat around Sarat's town, and I think I remember putting a moat in there because the zombies don't cross the water. They are afraid of the water somehow. There's something going on there. So would you go fishing in water that is basically runoff from mountains that are covered in dragon goo? I'm not sure about that. If we turn our attention to Dr. Evan Rock and we ask him about his gender, well, he's a man. And it's the 1980s. And it's the 1980s in South Africa, which means that women are fine to be secretaries, to be teachers, to be librarians, to be nurses, but he certainly won't ever find a woman in the scientific field running a nuclear power station, for example, or chasing down big creatures. He will definitely be a misogynist. Well, he'll definitely believe in the battle of the sexes. So he's an interesting one because he entrenches masculinity. The only way we could make this interesting would be if Dr. Evan Rock is challenging that status quo in the 1980s. If he's sort of fighting against that status, he doesn't want to be seen as a manly man. And then we have to dig into history. Especially in this kind of game, we'd have to look at it and say, well, in the 1980s, if you were part of the military or involved in military operations in any shape or form, and they detected any kind of deviance from the heteronormative value, you were quite literally taken off to a hospital called General 1, and you had enforced gender reassignment. So I think whatever Evan is doing, I think embracing his masculinity makes it a more interesting character, especially if he is encountering Americans who have a more liberal approach, or the British who've got female prime ministers and things running around in the 1980s. So this history lesson that we're diving into, the 1980s, makes the character a little bit more interesting, I think. Anyway, that's where we are on that one. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're running out of time. Okay, and of course, how do they feel about that character? How does that influence their approach to life and that sort of thing? Those are important questions for us to ask, but I think we've kind of answered them for each one. And I don't know, but for me, Estrix, TH4Y, and Dr. Rock are becoming more and more real as we are answering and exploring these. Which one would I want to hang out with? Probably Estrix or TH4Y, although I can imagine TH4Y being a little annoying sometimes. And Dr. Rock, well, I wouldn't want to hang out with him because of his views on politics or on women, but maybe because of his knowledge. We haven't got there yet, so let's see. The female king is mostly in power on a war level, much like the Mongolians mixed with the Amazonians of Greek mythology. The king is in charge of politics regarding peace treaties and neutering civilizations. Yeah, absolutely. So, how the world is built is always going to be interesting. And this is why you have to ask the GM when you are creating your character. You have to say, well, what is it? What's happening? Next, who raised your character? Who are your guardians? And this is, I would say, arguably the most disappointing answer that I think I have ever received in my life, to be to be honest with you. The amount of players who are raised as orphans is a very sad indictment of the state of our hobby. Because I have played games all over the world, and I constantly get given characters who are orphans. And you're going, why? Why do you make your character an orphan? As Zorgrim says, the standard answer is orphan. And from my perspective, it means that the GMs out there must be punishing players who have characters with living parents. I cannot, for the love of any reason, and if you have the answer, please let me know. I cannot understand why someone would go, no, parents are all dead. You can't want your own parents in real life to be dead. You can't find them that irritating that you really think that life would be better growing up without having parents. And I'll have you know that it's still not an answer. At no point were you a toddler, your parents died, and you mysteriously raised yourself. That doesn't happen. You will have had an adult, at least until your teens, who was providing for you in some way or form. Or you would have had a teen who's providing. You would have had a guardian, someone working with you to survive. And that's the question. Who raised you? Not, are your parents alive? That's one of the reasons why I asked who raised you, not what is the status of your parents. Zorgrim says because players don't want to bother thinking of parents. Yes, absolutely. I shudder to think that that is the answer. I really don't see how much brain power it takes to go, oh, mum's alive, she's retired and, does painting. Dad lives out on the farm with mum and, well, he's retired too. And he currently seems to be collecting butterflies. I don't know why. Really? That was more complicated than working out my plus to hit bonus when I level up? I don't know. For the game I'm in, it's just a game. Sure, it's just a game. This isn't the book on how to be a just the game playing player. This is a book on how to be a great player, how to make it not just a game. If you're happy for it to be just a game, that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we're looking at making characters that are real and that you're going to remember in 20 or 30 years' time. I still remember my earliest characters because of the truths that were formed around them. Not because I had come up with the system 20 or 30 years ago, but because there were certain things that happened. I was lucky that they happened. I have also got hundreds of characters I have no recollection of whatsoever. They made no impression on me because there was nothing truthful about them. They were just a collection of statistics. And that's what I'm really trying to look against and work against. Beyond Fantasy says, how do you spell nurture? I spell it exactly the same way that you do, because that's how you spell nurture. You're absolutely on point there. Dragon, in Shadowrun, my ballerina character GM killed off-parents and Doctor Who quirky grandfather to make a character have to commit crimes to pay for ballet lessons. Well, so interesting. I mean, that's a bit of a complicated one there. The GM, and this is why I'm saying, as GMs, we can train our players to be bad players by punishing players who have got complicated backstories and who have living parents, by killing them off as a dramatic, ha-ha, look, your parents are now dead, deal with it. Why? Why is that our choice as GMs? We need to be better than that. So when our players are giving us these answers, and we should make sure that we are not using them against the players. Sure, family can be used as part of adventure generation. Completely agree with that. But they don't always have to just be killed off for dramatic effect, right? Anyway. Okay, let's answer this question very quickly. Who raised your character? Estrix Breakbone, I should say. She doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of her forebears, which means she needs to know of her forebears. She needs to have a lineage that she can hate and rebel against or try not repeat. So she has to have parents. And so I think that's where we need to be, is that she has a mother and father who live in Sarat, and I would say are corpse miners. Right? So they are corpse miners. How does she feel about that? I think that the mistake of her forebears is in just doing what their forebears have done. Perhaps. Maybe that's not as exciting. Maybe the mistake is that her mother and father are hiding a great secret of their forebears and just remain as corpse miners to keep that thing secret. Maybe they found something inside this dragon and they kept it secret and a whole bunch of people died because of it. So now the mother and father continue doing the job because that's the only way to prevent people from asking questions. Could be interesting. Could be interesting. We're not answering those questions yet. We're still answering how does Estrix feel about her parents being corpse miners and raising her? She's structured and she's disciplined. So I think she would be appreciative. She would appreciate them. But she's also a diplomat. She's not following in her parents' footsteps. She's trying to learn how to talk to other people. She's trying to find common ground. So what if mother and father don't talk to each other? So from an early age, she had these bickering parents who now just don't talk to each other. And that was one of the reasons why she became a diplomat, was to try and find common ground between them. Is she ashamed of the job of her parents? That's another good question. Where could we go with this? There's so many things. And do you see how Estrix just starts to become this real dwarf that you feel could sit down next to you, have a cup of coffee, and you start saying, well, how are your parents talking to each other? I don't want to talk about it. I couldn't get any common ground with them, but the negotiations with the Allswatch Tower Commerce Guild is going really well. We found so she's going to sidestep her parents and talk about her job. That's one of the things that having these histories allows you to do, is you can drop in these little nuggets. You can make these little truths true for other players as you're going along, and it makes it more real for yourself. So if we skip back very quickly to TH4Y, who raised TH4Y? Well, I think this would be the military scientist, right? Or the military commander, or the military programmer, I would say. And that is interesting. Is it love? Is it hate? Well, we know that they enjoyed the power and the attention that they got at the military installation. So I think the military programmer was kind, generous, and I would say influential, because they had such a great time. Are they still alive? Well, that's a different question. And then you go to Dr. Rock and you say, well, are his parents still alive? There's not a lot of reason for them not to be alive. If he was born in the 60s, it means his parents are running around. They were probably born in the 1930s. So, or 1940s. So this is post-war family growing up. It's at the height of the apartheid era. So they were immediately elevated in status, in opportunity and that sort of thing. So are the parents still alive? I think so. I think the more normal we make his story, the more extraordinary it will be when we get to answers that are interesting. So raised by parents. And I think the idea here, parents, big family. Let's give him a big family. So he was sort of like the middle child, or maybe he was the last child. In Dutch, that'd be called a laatlammetjie, the last lamb, the late lamb. And so he's got this big happy space. And when we start to look at these answers, we've got, he lives in a town where he feels safe. He's got the right gender for the era. He's got a big happy family, lots of happy space there. There's lots of happiness going on in Dr. Rock's life, which means when the Cthulhu starts kicking in, because we know that this is coming in, it's also a light-hearted musical, so there's a lot of ma and pa and brother and sister and brother and other sister. You know, there's a big chorus number that's going to happen there. That's absolutely fine. So we're getting this sense of this very happy-go-lucky kind of guy who loves metal music. So that's an interesting one. Is TH4Y's educated genuine, or is the kindness and generosity part of an elaborate manipulation? Zorgrim, I think you are on the right course there, because remember the goal that we established long ago, the sort of the idea, the concept, was that TH4Y wanted to be free of an unbreakable pact. And possibly this programmer could be the one who holds that pact. That pact is not with a demon, that pact is with a programmer, with their actual creator, who has built them for a specific purpose. And I think that could be interesting. That could be interesting. So let's contemplate that. Okay, we've got 8 minutes left, and if we can just finish question number 4, then we are golden, because we already have answered quite a few things around question number 4. Question number 4 is, who were their parents and their guardians? What did they do? So mother and father of Estrix, we've already established, is they're corpse miners. They are hiding a dark past. Okay. TH4Y, the military programmer, kind, generous, influential, and we're now going to add manipulative, and holds power over TH4Y. Okay, lovely. And the parents of Dr. Rock, I think they are proud. I think dad could be in the military. And mom is a housewife. That's what she would be. And she would do lots of bake sales and all that kind of wonderful thing. And that's what she would do. Dr. Rock loves his mother, but, you know, she is there to support his dad. His dad is quite strict, but at the same time, there's a lot of kids, and it's, when you have fun, you have fun. But when you work, you work. I am basically just channeling most of my friends' lives back in the 1980s. Anyway, right. So by answering those questions, we've fleshed out their parents a little bit. We've given ourselves some things to think about. And also what this allows us to do, and this is the stock standard reason for all of this, is when the characters are sitting around the campfire, or sitting on the bridge of their ship, or they're hacking into a vault, or they are crawling through caves and they've found a small space to hide in. When they are sitting around doing nothing, or it's downtime. Imagine you are sitting there and one of the other characters is, oh, I hate my parents. I've just got a letter from my mother. She's fighting with my father again. Estrix can now immediately jump in and go, wait, your parents are fighting too? Mine haven't spoken to each other in 48 years. When I was born, all that my father said was, great, another pair of hands for the mine. And you're like, huh? So there's a bond that is immediately formed. And it's a lot of fun when you create this stuff without telling your fellow players what you've done. And if they don't find out about your character history, who's lost out? Nobody. Nobody's lost out. It's an opportunity for you to say, okay, well, I needed to add a little bit more into my role-playing. So now you also have a gauge for how can you up your game? How can you drive forward? Because you might be sitting there going, well, I'm already good. I do all of this stuff. But if you do all of this stuff and players at the table don't know it, then that means that you're not sharing enough in-game, in character. Now, you also, and this is, I should make very, very clear, at no point am I saying, you must tell everybody your backstory on day one. Hello, everyone. Sit down. I'm going to tell you my character's backstory. That's cheating. It's also boring. And none of them will remember any of it. Whereas if you're giving them out little pieces here and there as bits of conversation that organically just spring up, people will remember that. And that's important for us. That really is the hallmark of a great player, in my opinion. Okay. We've got Dragon saying, is Zeph music 1980s? I'm not sure. Zeph music? Led Zeppelin? I don't know what Zeph means. If you can expand on that acronym, we might be able to work it out. Otherwise, ask Google. Zorgrim says, my problem is more likely that I overshare because I'm so excited about what I have come up with. Yes, we are all very excited about what we have created. The joy and the practice is in letting it out in just enough pieces that everybody becomes interested in it. And I know that you will have that desire, oh, I've got to get this out, I've got to get this out, I've got to get this out. It will happen. We just need to be patient. And that is something that you can practice. And that is part of this journey of becoming a great player, is going, well, you know what? I need to practice. I need to practice. So if you ask me, ZEF, music in the 1980s, as in Die Antwoord, I do not think Die Antwoord was operating in the 1980s. As a matter of fact, I'm fairly certain that they weren't operating in the same way in which they were operating when they became famous in the past decade or so, I suppose. They would have been shut down by the government pretty damn quickly for all of their activities. I've shared the link for the Kickstarter for this book, The Practical Guide to Becoming a Great Player. And the Kickstarter is still going for another 15 days or so. It has been a pleasure joining you for this evening and chatting away and fleshing out these characters, making them a little bit more real. I am getting to the point where I'm like, I kind of want to start playing these characters now because we've got 3 very interesting characters that I think with just a few more bits and pieces, we'll be ready to play. And we'll be doing that next week, Friday, same time, same channel. And so I invite you to join me then. And until next week, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming. Goodbye.